Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Mocktail Minutes. This is Bailey.
And this is Brianna.
This week, I am drinking super basic water and lemon. I already had a roasted purpose this morning, so water and lemon now.
Oh, yeah, you're on it. I'm having a recess this morning and I'm having it before coffee, which I feel like I'm setting myself up for good things. I don't know. But it's a little like magnesium and adaptogen drinks. This one is lime citrus. And again, I think we talked like last week or the week before I had the lime cure, and I'm just not a lime person. But I actually like this one. So it's saying a lot.
Okay.
Because
this one's
only one
okay.
they had. Usually there's like 6 or 7 different ones. This was like the only one. I was like, oh, lime, but it's actually decent.
Have you tried is it the Moment brand? I think they're similar to the Recess
No.
brand, but they have like mocktails basically. I think we've talked about them. I still haven't ordered them yet. I went to order them though.
Oh, no, I'll have to try them. Actually, funny random story about that. Last week, my husband was at the store and I was like, oh, get me some Cure and get me a Recess. Like, so that I have a couple of like mocktails lined up. And he came home with Cure and a Reese's. He was like, I don't know. It was kind of
Oh,
random. He wanted a Reese's, but it's in the pantry. And I was like, no, a recess. And he was like, no, it said Reese's. And I was like, dyslexia.
maybe you want.
Yeah, I was like, okay. I was like, that was like a subconscious thing. He's like, okay, cool. Cure and Reese's. Like, got it. He's like, I was curious why you needed a
Like
Reese's for
we're
your
thinking
podcast. I was like, I didn't.
we're just switching it
So
up. We're gonna start
he got his
reviewing candy now.
mocktails and chocolate. But yeah, I just thought I would add that.
Yeah.
He's gonna listen to this and be like, "Dang, you just totally threw me under the bus."
Yeah, I'm glad you got
All
your
the things.
Recess and a Reese's, I guess. Was it at least like an
Yeah.
Easter one, like the egg?
Yes. I actually watched a really funny TikTok video this morning on the hierarchy of the shapes, and everyone was like, "The egg is
Uh-huh.
superior. The egg is the superior shape." So yeah.
They're really good. I saw a video on Instagram that was like dairy-free Reese's. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna have to try that.
I love it. I think it's like my favorite candy.
Or if the company could just make them dairy-free. Yeah, they're pretty good. Actually, I'm actually not a huge chocolate person. I am more of like a Swedish fish peel and pull Twizzler person.
Hmm.
I like the fruity.
Yeah, like this sour kind of gummy. Yeah.
If I don't like sour, I like the fruity.
Okay. Yeah. It's like Skittles.
Yeah, I like Skittles. Let's
Okay,
jump
let's try it.
into this week's topic. We're doing a little bit of a macro tracking review. So, this is something that we commonly see with people that are coming to work with us. They're macro tracked before, or they currently are, or they're interested in it. So, we're going to give kind of our opinions, pros, cons. Should you do it? Should you not do it? Rundown on this. So, jumping in, let's just cover what are macros in the first place. I think we should just break it down that way. That way, we're on the same
Hmm.
page.
Yeah, so people know what macros mean. So macros basically means you take the 3 macronutrients that you need, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and you decide what percentage of calories is going to be from each. A typical macro
Yeah.
breakdown is like mostly carbohydrates and then 10, a little bit more fat than protein or a little bit more protein than fat, depending on who you're talking to or whatever. Some people get, I guess the traditional macronutrients is broken down like that, but you will go to macro coaches that break it down differently. Sometimes you're doing really low fat, really low carb, whatever it is. But basically, it just means what percentage of your calories is coming from each. So that's why when someone's like, I need to meet my macros, they're basing it off of how many grams they think they need to get that percentage of their calories from that food.
And I
Hopefully
will
that was
say,
simple.
yeah, I will say because it has that breakdown of each macronutrient, I do prefer that over calorie counting because calories, I mean, you could meet your calories in Oreos, but I mean, you're
Yes.
just not going to feel so well. Or if you're meeting it and getting your protein in, your carbs, your fat, that's going to feel different. But your macros are your carbs, which are your primary energy source of energy, I mean, your primary source of energy. Carbs are your body's primary source of energy.
Yeah.
That's what they are. Words are hard this morning.
Yes.
But they're going to be found in your grains, like what we typically think of carbs, your fruits, vegetables, even your dairy products, your nuts, seeds. So they come in different areas. And each gram of carbohydrates has 4 calories of energy. Other macros
Mm-hmm.
are your protein. So, protein is going to be essential for building and repairing the tissues in your body, made up of amino acids. They're going to be the backbones of your enzymes, your hormones. It's going to do lots of different functions, especially we love how it affects our muscle mass. And protein is the same as carbs. Each gram of protein provides 4 calories of energy. Fat is a little bit different. So it is another source of energy and it plays a role in various body functions such as your hormone production and nutrient absorption with your fat soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, and K. However, where it's a little different is each gram of fat provides 9 calories of energy. So it is the most calorie dense macronutrient. And this is why I do like to play with fat a little bit more when I'm working with people, especially if you're not macro tracking, because it can just add up super quickly.
Yeah.
I had one person, she was actually doing the factor meals and getting a lot of the higher fat ones. And like
Mm-hmm.
one of them, she was doing the factor meals plus like a salad. So it was like 70 grams of fat in one meal. I was like, well, that is where it's going to add up and get really high. And like I said, it can be easy to overdo it
Mm-hmm.
on fat because fat is in very different areas. I mean, your dressing, your sausage, your butter, your oils. So it's definitely not a bad thing, but we just sometimes we need to look at what types of fat we're doing, how much we're doing, and if we can cut it back by a few servings and you still feel full and satisfied, then you're probably good to go.
Oh yeah, it's easy to overdo fat because of the 9 calories per gram. Like it's it provides so much more energy. I will say I like macro counting as a tool. Like if I were to look at any of the tools, I would say macro counting is probably the best because it does take into account like all the macronutrients that you need. It makes sense. You're like really looking at like, okay, nutrients as opposed to just calories. It's a flawed system though, especially if you're not ready for it. And I will say a lot of the macro coaches that are on the internet that are like, oh, I just do macros, that fat is the one area that I really do see a problem with because usually they're trying to make you have a large calorie deficit with your macros. And so the number one thing that's going to go is fat. And so I'll get people like come to me and they're like, yeah, I'm only supposed to have like 30 or 40 grams of fat. And I'm like, well, that's too low, and then because of macro counting, they're a little scared of fat because that's always like the no thing. Like that's the thing that's going to make you go over your macros. So I think it's helpful if you know how to use it.
Yes. And you mentioned a good
Yes.
point of using it as a tool, where I do agree with you. I
Mm-hmm.
think it is a great tool to utilize, but not as a tool to use forever. So this is one
Yeah.
just going back to our house analogy. This is the one where maybe we just need to use it to build the house and then we can get rid of it type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think where it can become a problem or overwhelming or it turns into not so much a tool, it turns into more of a crutch where we get
Yeah.
really out of tune with our hunger and satiety hormones because we're so
Mm-hmm.
focused on this number. And to be quite honest, our
Yes.
body, I mean, you can have different needs on a day-to-day basis. It is actually perfectly normal to feel hungrier one day, not as hungry the next day, because your life is not
Mm-hmm.
the exact same every day. So it makes sense. And there's lots of factors that go into that. So then if you're trying to meet this exact same number every day, yeah, you're probably going to feel a little bit different. And if you're not super hungry, then I honestly don't think that you have to just throw food in just so you're meeting these goals. So it can become a crutch. Yeah, where you don't really understand what is going on in your body. You don't understand what your body is trying to tell you. All you're seeing is these numbers. And then we get into that black and white thinking. And then we just get really out of tune and we're
Mm-hmm.
unsure what our body needs.
The other thing I've seen it do is, and I guess like in theory, I see why people do this, but the whole thing of like, well, does it fit my macros? Like, oh, I can have these foods because it fits my macros, and like I can, like, we find loopholes, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And so they'll make like not great choices with food because they're just like, well, it fits that breakdown, so it's fine. And so maybe you're not making very good nutrient choices because you're just looking at those numbers. And like you said, like it kind of disconnects you from like, okay, well, what should I have right now? Right. Or like, how do I go out to eat, put together a meal that works best instead of just being like, does it fit? The other thing too is a lot of times your macros is based off of like a maintenance amount of calories, which is great. We love that. However, I have seen so many people that cannot start at their maintenance amount of calories because they've been eating in like 1,000 calorie deficit, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to give you a macro breakdown for 2,000 calories when you've been eating 1,100, 1,200 calories every day. Like, it's going to be so much food. You're going to feel very overwhelmed. And then you're going to be doing like those filler foods just to meet macros. Like I have heard people doing the craziest things to meet a protein macro. Then I'm
Yes.
like, probably not necessary. Like,
Yeah.
that's probably not. Like,
We
let's
have to think
not
of
do that.
nutrient density because you're exactly right. Protein, I feel like, is one when we look at macros. I feel like anyone that has come to me that has macro counted, they feel like they have trouble reaching protein goals. So then it
Yeah.
becomes a lot of protein supplementing, which I think protein supplementing is fine, like using a protein powder, utilizing protein bars as needed. We
Mhm.
don't want to live off protein supplementing though, but things like we want to get high quality protein supplementing. But then if we're just like, we
Yeah.
need an extra 20 grams and we're throwing things in like the Quest chips or something. I mean, I've never tried them because I have a dairy allergy, so I can't try them. But from
They're not good.
what I've been told, I think they can be good in a pinch, but they're not super satisfying. They're not super filling. Like I've
Mhm.
had someone who's ate 3 bags of Quest chips for lunch just to get like 60 grams of protein in.
Yes.
She's like, I'm still hungry. I'm like, let's try more of a
Yeah.
nutrient dense protein option. Instead of doing 3 bags of Quest chips, cool, your macros are reflecting, but you're not getting that satisfaction piece. You're missing out on some other nutrients. So, like a piece of chicken. That let's do
Yeah.
something like that to get that nutrient density. Or even
More like
carbohydrate.
bioavailable for,
Yes,
yeah.
bioavailable, make sure your
Mhm.
body can utilize it really well. Or when we're thinking of carbohydrates usually no one has issues reaching. But if we're doing just a bunch of packaged chips or granola bars or whatever it is, you're probably going to meet your carbs very easily. But again, we want those nutrient dense, high complex carbs. So you're also getting some fiber in there and getting
Mhm.
your riboflavin, your B vitamins, all those as well along with it. We don't want to just eating honey or
Right.
sugar all day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing too, like two things that came up. Like, number one, that carb thing. Yes, everyone is like, oh, I can eat my carbs, no big deal. But I think we're counting macros where it really fails to get people to look at is fiber. Because most of the time people are doing like rice or something like that to meet carbs, which is fine. You can totally have rice, but it becomes this thing where they're like, oh, okay, just rice with every meal and like I'll meet my
Yep.
carbs. It's like, but we're not getting a lot of fiber. And the other thing is macros don't always support eating for balanced blood sugar because I'll get people who are like, okay, I was in a rush. I had a really small breakfast and then like lunch I got kind of busy and then for dinner I had to meet all my macros, so I had this like giant meal and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, let's see hormonally what's going on when you don't eat a lot all day and then you have this giant meal. Like that's not helping your blood sugar. Like, yeah, you met your macros for the day.
And now you're
You may
bloated.
probably met your calories. Yeah, but now you're bloated, you're uncomfortable, you're having like, we're now requiring a lot of insulin to break down this giant meal because you haven't eaten much all day and you're trying to fit all your macros in at the end of the day and now you're probably going to sleep poorly and it's like, so macros are a great I think it's a great simple tool to really get people to think like, I need protein, I need fat, I need fiber, or no, not fiber. I need protein, I need fat, I need carbohydrates. My gosh. It is, words are hard this morning. I need the 3 macronutrients, but that's it. Like, it's kind of like, we're not going to teach you about your hunger and fullness. We're not going to teach you about your energy needs changing. We're not going to teach you about fiber. And we're not going to teach you about blood sugar balance. And so it's not fail proof. Like, and I'm hearing this on the internet so much, like, it is the fail proof way. I'm like, what? It's not.
I've
It's a great tool, but you gotta like know all of it. Like you said, the house, like we can use this totally. And we do. I'm sure with clients, we are making sure people are getting a good macronutrient breakdown. Like it's not like we're not, that's we're dietitians. We're looking at your macronutrient breakdown, but it's just different than probably what you think it is.
Yeah, it's going back to understanding what your body is telling you, what it's feeling like. And we teach you these components in a different way in Metabolism Makeover with showing you how to include the protein, the healthy fats, and the fiber
Mm-hmm.
emphasis, because that's going to help you in the long run with your blood sugar balancing, getting in tune with your body. And we actually just released the spring recipe bundle. So we'll link that in the show
Mm-hmm.
notes. So that way you can kind of see like what do these meals look like, and you get some new spring recipes. So we can add that
Yeah.
to here as well. But yeah, it goes back to understanding what your body needs, using it as a tool, not the end all be all solution. It's funny you mentioned rice.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like rice is such like a meal prep thing. It's like chicken and rice, chicken and
It
rice, chicken
is.
and rice.
Taking
Like get some beans in, get
a,
some quinoa,
yes,
get some variety.
get something else in. And then it's funny because people start to see like, oh, I can't meet my macros unless I have carbs. So I do like it in that way. Like it makes
Yeah.
people not so scared of carbs, but it's just still like what we're doing is we're trying to find a tool to be like, what? Tell me what I need to eat. But nobody is like, let me figure out how to eat. Let me
Hmm.
figure out what my body really needs and how to adjust. And I get it, right? Like not everybody goes to school to be a dietitian, but I'm always trying to like help clients with that. Going back, because I did have a question about the last, because I did a blog post about macros like a while ago, and I had someone tell me like I gained weight when I started doing macros, and I wanted to talk about that again super quick with the whole like reverse dieting. It's probably because somebody gave you a macro breakdown based off your maintenance calories. There's a lot of times in the beginning when someone is starting to like eat up and eat a normal amount of food, I don't think a traditional macronutrient breakdown is appropriate.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like it's going to be too much food. It's probably going to be too little fat, too little protein, too high carbs, and you're probably going to gain some weight,
Yeah.
which
And
is why,
kind of,
like, you need to work with someone.
and that's what I look at like as your dietitian. If you are coming to me under eating and I'm calculating, because I do my estimations on what I think you need. So I have
Yeah.
that background. I don't necessarily always tell you, hey, this is your calorie goal, this is your carbs, this is your I don't necessarily communicate that to everyone because that's something that I'm watching, taking in, using my professional thinking of like, what are you doing? Are we meeting these goals?
Yeah.
So if you were coming
Yeah.
to me at 1,000 calories, but I know you need 1,900, I am not going to give you recommendations based on 1,900 calories. I'm going to
Yeah.
actually, when I calculate about how much you need at this point, I am dropping it down to maybe like 1,200. So it's slightly
Mm-hmm.
higher than what you're doing and making this more of a goal, breaking down the macros that way. But then taking a step further, I look at what you're doing and I see like obviously each section of your macros are going to be lower, but I will pick out which one can
Mm-hmm.
we start with. So protein, for example, I will do, let's just increase it by 10 grams. So that way you're not also
Mm-hmm.
going from 40 grams of protein in a day to 120. Like that's a big jump. So it's making those
Yeah.
small changes, and it feels silly to be like just 10 more grams. Like, yes, because we want it to
Yes.
be a slow, steady increase. So when you're like, basically to set up your macros, you have to calculate like macronutrient goals. And that's the other thing. Like if you're doing this on your own and if you don't know what your macro goals could be like, it's not maybe going to be super accurate. Maybe it's not what your body needs. That's why you hire
Yeah.
professionals to make sure what you're doing is actually what you need. So you set up your
Mm-hmm.
macro goals, and then basically you kind of track what you do. And this is the other part where accuracy has to come in, because if you are estimating everything you're tracking, well, it's not going to give us that true picture anyways. Like if you coffee creamer, for example, if you're like, well, I do a splash, I'm like, okay, is that splash a tablespoon? Or when you measure it out, is it more like a fourth of a cup? Like that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a big difference, and it's going to differentiate your macros. Or if you're not logging all the parts, but you're meeting your macros, but we already know you're not logging everything, then if we're already at the
Mm-hmm.
higher amount, are you going over? And that's why you're struggling to lose weight. So we have to have that accuracy piece with it. And then from there,
Yeah.
I even like with all of our questions, we still have to adjust based on our, again, professional opinion, how your body's reacting, how your body is responding, so that we can
Mm-hmm.
adjust your macronutrients and then evaluate, assess again, how well are you responding to those macro targets, and adjust again. So it can be still a little
Yes.
bit of trial and error. And I would say it kind of got trendy, I would say like 2005-ish, 2010 maybe. I feel like it started to
Yeah.
rise. And really the idea was for it to be a flexible way to meet your goals.
To eat.
So
Mm-hmm.
then, because it just allows you more food choices, it's not like a yes no list, which is again is the part that I like about it. And the idea was to include the variety of foods. But then again, when you are tracking, it becomes time consuming. It makes like even doing a recipe hard, because if you're making like a chili or a casserole and you have 10 different ingredients, and now you have to sit there and log each ingredient, but then you're like, well, I made this whole thing and now I have to break it down to what I ate, then it's like that whole production of a meal, and it gets pretty stressful.
Well, and that's what I want people to know is because I feel like it's a safety net, right? Like we are like, if we met our macros, we feel good, regardless of how we feel, regardless of any of that. Like it's this thing being like, okay, we did well today. And there's a lot of room for error. I see so many people tracking macros wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it wrong. And I don't know how else to tell them that. They're doing it wrong. I will see somebody add a scoop of protein into their muffin mix to make muffin proteins, and then they think they got 10 grams of protein per muffin when I'm like, wow, that's 10 spread out through 12 muffins. So it's not, and it's okay, right? Like the world goes on. People weigh
Yeah.
food wrong, they log them wrong, they get portions wrong. And so what I want people to realize is you can't just use this tool and be like, if I'm doing it and it's perfect every day, I must be doing everything right. Because I think people get really frustrated, and like 8 times out of 10 I'll have someone break it down for me and I'm like, well, that's where you're going wrong. You're
Yeah.
actually not doing what you think you're doing. And so that's why you need to understand your body. You need to understand how to make food choices based off how you feel, and you need to know what the heck you're eating and what it does for you,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people like, I tried macros for so long, it did literally nothing and I'm so frustrated. And it's like, yeah, rightfully so, I totally get it, it's hard. And then it's like, well, you did it wrong, and
Yeah.
that's okay, you did it, but but you were just so like, if it is correct on my app, I'm good, you know.
Or it's like the other way too, where I've macro counted before, I lost the weight and it was great. And as soon as I stopped macro tracking, then I gained all the weight back. What's that? That tells me is that you didn't understand what your body completely needed. You didn't get the
Mhm.
opportunity to learn what it needed to go off track, literally, and to not have to track anymore.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah. So
again, like that's where it's a tool to kind of maybe get you set up. And some people, I mean, I've had successes with clients, metabolism makeover
mhm,
members that never track anything in their life, and it
mhm,
works out great. But if I utilize it more for people who are already tracking when they come to see me, because they're already doing it. So we kind of adjust what they're needing so they can see that, and then we wean them off tracking, and then they start to recognize what their body feels like when they're telling me, okay, I had 2 eggs for lunch, and I had some veggies and maybe guacamole, and it felt pretty good, but maybe I was hungry a little bit sooner. I'm like, okay, what do you think was off there? Well, my 2 eggs was only
Yeah.
about 12 grams of protein. And then so they're
Mm-hmm.
recognizing where meals are falling behind. So if you're someone who's like, I've macro counted before, it worked, and then I gained the weight back, I just need to get back to macro tracking. Maybe you just need to learn a different way. Maybe we can utilize
Yes.
it to set you up so you understand and it can help you maybe connect with your body because you can see the numbers and feel the feelings, and then we wean you off of it. And also, just macro tracking may not be suitable for everyone, especially if you have a history of disordered eating or are prone to like
Oh yeah.
the obsessive weight loss behaviors. So, in that case, I would say you need more flexibility and more education on kind of informed intuitive eating.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where we come in as well because we meet people where they're at. There, I have had clients where I'm like, there's no way I'm going to let you see the numbers or macronutrient breakdown. There's
Oh, yeah,
absolutely
I
no way.
turn
I'm
it
not
off
giving you a number.
sometimes.
You're turning it off and you're not going to hear it come from me. I'm going to give you some guidelines for meals, but no way I'm going to tell you. And then there's others where I'm like, you can benefit from this because I feel like if you see this data, it's going to click, you know?
Mhm.
And so,
We utilize that more in one on one coaching versus metabolism makeover because we have the Practice Better program that allows you to journal your foods. And so, yeah,
mhm.
there are some clients that I turn off the numbers so they can still log it in there, but you can't see anything.
And I think like if you're listening to
It's
this and you're
freeing.
like, "Oh gosh, I don't want to track anymore, but I'm terrified just to not track." This is where we are like your little bumpers, where your safety net, because we're looking at what you're eating and I'm making comments all the time like, "Hey, try adding this here," or "Hey, like pair this with that," or maybe you don't need so much of this here, maybe, like, and
Yeah, like
it's
moving
nice
things
because
around.
then it's like, when a client goes all day and I haven't made comments on anything, they're like, okay, it was okay. I did it. Oh my God, I did it. I'm fine. Like, oh, and so it can kind of help you if you're someone who's like, I really truly don't want to track anymore, but it like freaks me out. Definitely work with someone one on one because that's like where you build a lot of confidence because I think that's really what people want. They want to feel confident with their food choices and what they're doing, and they just don't
Exactly.
have that. So,
And that's where
yeah,
we can build the confidence where you're still able to journal out, log what you're eating, but it doesn't feel so obsessive. And it's a really scary process, I think, to go through because that has been your crutch for so long. And that has been what you have been told to rely on for years. So then for someone like us to come and be like, but what if we didn't? You're like, whoa, red flag type
yeah.
feeling.
Well, pump the brakes. Don't be
Yeah.
crazy now. I
So it's
just told you I can't lose weight.
yes. So it's scary, but it's freeing. And when I hear clients who are like, this is super weird to not be able to see the numbers, that tells me you need this even more.
Yes, especially when you start to feel good. That's my favorite when clients are
Yeah.
like, I feel really good with
Uh-huh.
what I'm eating. I have no idea. I think I know, but like I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
Yes,
Or I've had some where it's like
I do.
you're eating the same meals that you were before when you saw the numbers, and now that you don't see the numbers, now you're like, I'm doing something wrong type of feeling. Just tells me I need
Mm-hmm.
to educate more on how your body is working so that you truly understand. So there's a lot of things
Yes,
that go into macro tracking. I think, like we said, it has its pros, it has its cons. It can be a good tool, but I don't think that needs to be your foundation.
agreed. I don't think you need to. You can absolutely meet your needs and meet your macronutrient balance breakdown without traditional macro counting. It's
Mhm.
people do it all the time.
So use it as a tool if you would like. You also don't have to. And that's where I
Yeah.
ask our opinion on it. Tell us about your experience with it, and we'll kind of give you that honest review because it's going to work for some people, it's not going to work for other people. And I will say, like, there are some meals where I'll kind of like pop into an app just to see, am I missing something here? Or if I notice like a meal
Yeah.
didn't keep me full as long, maybe sometimes I'll pop that into an app, be like, oh, well, that makes sense. It's a lot lower fat than what I usually do,
Yeah.
or something like that. Just to,
You're like, I thought this had more fiber in it. It doesn't. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Because even
I'm telling
something,
you.
if you're like, I had a bunch of like a tomato or something, like it's a little bit lower in fiber. So maybe that did feel different than broccoli and zucchini. So just seeing those can be helpful in that way.
Yeah. 100%. I agree.
Anything else you think we need to add about
Yeah.
our macro tracking review?
I think we covered it all. I think it might be helpful for people to hear, like, oh, okay, they're really all about like not needing to track, but they are also like, I don't know, no, this could be helpful. Like, I feel like that might, because sometimes I get people that come to me like, okay, I know, I'm not supposed to track anything, I know. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the police,
Exactly.
but
And
so I think people might be like, oh, okay.
I think with that too, when I talk about metabolism makeover for myself, a lot of times I do talk about like learning about your body, putting meals together without having to track. So it does often get translated as I'm not allowed to track. But the idea when
Mhm.
we say that is that more so if you are currently tracking, you can get off tracking. Or if you aren't tracking, you
Yes.
don't have to track to eat blood sugar balancing meals. That is the main idea. And like you said, we're not the police. Like if you think tracking is going to be helpful, it's just going to help you see those numbers and it's going to help you understand these foods better, then do it and do it for
Hmm.
maybe just a free day. Goodness gracious, a few days, like 3, and
Yes.
see what you recognize. So I've also had some people kind of just focus on the fat piece of things because like I said, that's an easy one to overdo. And then they're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
okay, I was eating 50 grams of fat at every meal. I didn't necessarily need that." So,
Right.
if you follow us on Instagram and you've seen us talk about it, yeah, you probably have heard us say lose weight without tracking. Does not mean that you're like a bad person if you track while you're in metabolism makeover or anything. It's a good check-in sometimes.
I think that's like a good thing to end on. Like the fact that most people are coming into working with us as that is their main tool, and they're just kind of maybe supplementing with like trying to figure out how their body works, when your main tool should be understanding how your body works, knowing what it needs, and you can supplement here and there with tracking, because there it's totally fine to spot check here and there, make sure you're really like actually getting what you think, but it doesn't need to be that thing every single day where you're just like meticulously tracking and solely using that as your weight loss or health or whatever tool.
Yeah. Well, if you guys have any other questions that pop up after listening to this episode, feel free to send us a message and we'll either answer them on Instagram or if we have a lot come through, we could also do a follow-up Q&A session for macro tracking and discuss more about it. But I hope this gives you good insight. It's not a yes, it's not a no. It's we'll see what helps you type of thing.
It depends.
It
It depends.
depends.
Our favorite line. It
Yes.
depends. But it
Maybe
really does. So
yeah,
yeah, let
maybe
us
we
know
should put
what
that
you
on
guys
one of
think.
our t-shirts.
It depends. I think we should.
Yeah. We're working on merch for you guys. So let us know
Yes,
if
I'm
you're
excited.
actually interested in merch too. I want to wear a
Hmm.
t-shirt for our podcast.
Or if it'll just be us. I mean, I'll wear it.
That's fine. That's fine too. All right,
All
everyone.
right.
Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day and we will talk to you next week. Bye.
All right. Bye.